Great. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking your time from your busy schedule to join us for our spring summer employer panel series for 2022. Hello and welcome to the Office of Workforce Development, also known as OWD's Spring Summer Employer Panel Series with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, DSNI. We're proud to partner with DSNI for this equitable hiring collaborative that we are launching. Today, we will kick it off with our first employer panel, Diversity in Real Estate and Development, moderated by John Smith, DSNI's Executive Director. While many hands went into this panel, I'd like to give special acknowledgements to Abigail Cross, Peggy Hines Watson, and Katie Lesner from our OWD staff. My name is Trin Nguyen. I'm the Director of the Office of Workforce Development. OWD is an innovative agency within Mayor Wu's Economic Opportunity and Inclusion Cabinet that seeks to ensure the full participation of all Boston residents in the city's economic vitality and future. OWD funds and oversees programs that promote workforce development through education, job training, apprenticeships, financial coaching and credit building, and career pathways that lead to great paying jobs. Please visit owd.boston.gov to learn more about our work. Today's format includes a welcome by our Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, followed by our moderator, John Smith, who will introduce our esteemed panelists with John Barrows. We will then open it up to a Q&A. We love to hear from you, so please use the chat box on your right-hand side of your screen to enter your comments and questions. Please note that this session is also being recorded. It will then be uploaded to our website in case you or anyone who could not access today's session may do so thereafter. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, Segun Idowu. A lifelong resident of Boston, Chief Idowu is a proud product of the Boston Public Schools. Following his graduation from Boston Latin Academy, he earned his Bachelor of Arts in History at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and honors from the Phi Beta Kappa and Golden Key Societies. In August of 2014, he organized the Boston Police Camera Action Team with his colleague, Shakia Scott. BPAC's mission was to further accountability and safety in Boston through the mandatory use of police body-worn cameras. In April of 2020, Boston Magazine recognized Segun as one of the 100 most influential people in the city of Boston. In July, the Boston Globe recognized him on the front page of their Sunday edition as a man of the moment for his work in ramping up BECMA's efforts to advocate for and direct resources to Black businesses impacted by COVID pandemic, and later honor him as a Bostonian of the Year that December. Chief, take it away, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Trin. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. I'll just say one thing very briefly. There's a saying I once heard. Actually, it was around City Hall when I was here 10 years ago, that some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, some people ask what happened. And I got to say that it's been a pleasure to work with someone like Trin, who's a force to be reckoned with and is someone that helps to make things happen. So appreciate the warm introduction, but really the opportunity to be here and continue to support the work of the Office of Workforce Development, the Office of Financial Empowerment, incredible resource that many Bostonians have been tapping into. It is one arm of city government that is saving lives and livelihoods. And so I want to thank Trin and all of her team for the incredible work that they're doing. Also want to thank all of you who are here this afternoon for this really important conversation as we're talking about not just opportunities for Bostonians, but really the future of our city. As Trin mentioned, there is a new name for our cabinet. So if we were here a year ago, I would have shared that I am working with an amazing group of folks with the Office of Economic Development, of which I am grateful that this panel is joined by my predecessor, Mr. John Barros, who certainly laid a strong foundation for us to build upon. And so we changed our name with my coming in here from economic development to economic opportunity and inclusion for two reasons. One is because this is government, and government is committed to making things more difficult and cumbersome. Tough to remember. And so now our name, Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, goes from being a great acronym of OED to EIEIO. So there you have it. We didn't think about the acronym before we changed the name. But the very real and important reason that we changed the name of this cabinet is, I think, actually the importance and reason for this conversation today. It's that, when I or the mayor were engaging with Bostonians on a day-to-day basis, when they hear the term economic development, they don't believe that they see themselves in this term. They don't believe that their values or hopes or outlooks are recognized in this term economic development, because what many Bostonians see are the cranes in the skies. They think about the daily conversations they're having at their own dinner tables around gentrification and displacement. And so it was really important to us that before people meet me or anyone affiliated with the cabinet, that they understand the work that we're doing and who we're doing it for. And that is why we shaped a new vision for our work, which is one of an equitable, sustainable, vibrant city that centers people and that creates opportunities to build generational wealth. And we are seeking to achieve this vision in 4 different ways this year alone. One is through our COVID recovery, how we are building the proper infrastructure to help our small businesses, our communities shift from survival mode to rebound and recovery. Our second bucket is one of neighborhood revitalization, how we are focused on turning and transforming our neighborhoods into destinations, ensuring that when visitors or tourists are coming to our city or our family members, that they are finding all of the really important and culturally vibrant entities that make our neighborhoods what they are all across the city and not just in specific parts of the city, as well as how we're turning residents into tourists of their own city on a day-to-day basis. The third bucket, which is really important and critical to the work that I was doing prior to coming to this role, is how we're shifting city investments. And so everything under this bucket is going to be focused on making sure that we're not just hitting, but exceeding our goals of doing business with the people who make Boston what it is today, ensuring that women-owned businesses, BIPOC-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, LGBT-owned businesses, so many of these small businesses that, again, help make our local economy what it is, that we are doing business with them and awarding a significant amount of more contracts to help grow the capacity of these businesses, which are hiring the vast majority of Bostonians. And finally, our catch-all bucket of prosperity for all, something that makes this conversation critical, our strategies centered around workforce development, how we are strengthening the talent pipeline, but also having a bigger focus on how we are retaining this talent when they come here to the city, as well as how we are enhancing our economic competitiveness on the global stage and enhancing our global affairs unit to not just be focused on protocol and greeting folks when they come to the city, but how we are enhancing this department to also focus on creating sustainable agreements with our partners across the country and across the world that will yield tremendous benefits for Bostonians, and how we're connecting local companies to trade opportunities all across the world. This conversation is important because, as I mentioned in the beginning, the name change is based on how many Bostonians see themselves in the broader context and broader conversation around the development of our city. And it's important for me to say that I know by being here today that conversation is in the past tense, that's how things were. But because of folks like John and Dave and John Barros and Joyce and Trin and Chrystal and Tamara, the future of this city, I am very confident, is very bright, because these are folks that are that have a track record of being focused on equity, on making this city a better place for everybody. And I'm really excited that this is the group that's been brought together to talk about these issues, but to also share all of the work that they have been doing and the work that they will be doing to make this city a more vibrant, sustainable place for all. So want to thank you all for being here. I'll end, as I always do, with the proverb that kind of informs the work that we're doing here in economic opportunity and inclusion. It's a proverb that says, if you want 1 year of prosperity, grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow trees. But if you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. And I want to thank all of the panelists here, the moderator, and certainly all of the team at the Office of Workforce Development for being people and communities that are focused on growing people, ensuring the prosperity of Boston and our region for generations to come. So thank you all very much for having me, and I will turn it back over to Trin.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. John Barrows will introduce our esteemed panelists.
Thank you, Trin. And I want to first thank Chief Idowu for your leadership. I want to personally thank you for your partnership when I was in government, and for convening this panel and allowing us to continue to do the work with you. I think the direction you're moving the cabinet in and your priorities are really exciting, and I'm excited to continue to partner with you in those. Want to thank Trin, Director Nguyen, and the Office of Workforce Development for putting this together. Thank the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, and particularly we'll hear later from the Executive Director, John Smith. Before we get this going, I want to introduce the panelists and then introduce the topic. I'm going to ask the panelists to turn on their cameras. I see a couple of them on, but as I introduce Chrystal Kornegay, I'm going to ask Chrystal to put her camera on as well. The first to my left is Tamara Small. Tamara is the CEO of NAIOP, the trade association representing the commercial real estate industry in Boston. Tamara's a fierce advocate on behalf of the industry, and she's a voice to ensure, in fact, that development, laws, regulations affecting the industry are also building on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, she brings professionals together, often in the real estate community here in Boston, to talk about those matters, from developers, owners, investors, and consultants. The Massachusetts chapter of NAIOP is the largest in the International Commercial Real Estate Association. I think the chapter has close to 1,700 members who are all involved in different parts of the real estate community here. Also want to introduce Dave Madan. And I've known Dave for a long time in different capacities, and Dave's done a lot in the community. He would call himself a small-scale housing developer. He's a giant in many ways. He is a housing developer and the founder of several racial justice and urban land organizations. He is currently a partner at Boston Investments. He's a founder and chair of the Builders of Color Coalition. He's co-founder and president of Boston Farms and Community Land Trust, and is a board member of NAIOP. He previously served as a founding board member of the Urban Farming Institute, vice president of the board of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and founder and director of The Move. He lives in Lower Roxbury, grew up in Cambridge, and studied urban planning and business at UC Berkeley. And I think Chrystal can hear me. Chrystal, if you can hear me, throw your camera on as I introduce you. And if not, I'm going to have to call you. But let me introduce Chrystal while I maybe send her a text. Chrystal Kornegay is currently the executive director of the MassHousing. And MassHousing produces and preserves affordable rental and home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income borrowers. She developed a nationally recognized, she's developed a lot of different programs while she's been at MassHousing, but one I want to call out specifically is a nationally recognized program for home ownership production in communities of color specifically. Before she joined MassHousing, Chrystal served as our state's undersecretary for housing and community development. And then before that, she was the president and chief executive officer of Urban Edge, one of New England's largest CDCs. Chrystal serves on a number of different boards, on Mass DOT board. She serves on the National Housing Trust. She's part of the National Council of State Housing Agencies and is a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, their advisory committee. And so she's very active, but I can't get her to put her camera on right now. So I'm going to ask someone else to text her. Chrystal will be joining us. I can see her. She's on, and I talked to her a little earlier. But while we're trying to get Chrystal to get on, I am going to start with our two panelists here. And before I kick off the question, I wanted to frame the issue we're talking about here today. Chief Idowu talked about opportunity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, the real estate community, the real estate industry, which is a high growth, wealth producing industry, has often been tied to systemic racism, to our wealth gap, our racial wealth gap, with rampant discrimination in everything from planning to development, with redlining, issues around financing and borrowing, and issues around renting and availability for buying. So this panel, in fact, has members on it that are committed to addressing these issues. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Changing the demographics, changing who participates in this industry itself is critical to achieving the equity, to building opportunity, to making sure there's more inclusion, and then to be able to build wealth and eliminate the gap, to eliminate the income gap and build careers through the opportunity we see in this industry. So as we talk about that, my first question is pretty clear, and the question is first going to go to Tamara. And so Tamara, talk to us a little bit about, what is the real estate industry? What can we think about when we think about careers in the industry? Define the industry for us, and then talk to us about what you think some of those opportunities that we can find in the industry.
Great. Well, thank you, John, and thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with this great group. Just to give a little bit of background, as John mentioned, NAIOP, Massachusetts, we are the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. So we are a trade association representing the commercial real estate industry. And oftentimes people ask, what actually is commercial real estate? And kind of the way I think about it is basically all real estate other than single family homes. So that means retail properties, multifamily properties, mixed use, office, industrial, institutional, and certainly important for the city right now, lab space as well. And so that's really a huge amount of land when you think about it, and also economic impact that this industry has on Massachusetts and certainly on the city of Boston. In terms of career opportunities, I think when I first, maybe thinking back even to high school, I don't think I even knew what commercial real estate really was. I knew there were buildings in a city. I didn't really know anybody in the field. So I don't think I actually really fully understood what opportunities existed. And it's pretty amazing to think about the different career paths that one could pursue within the field of commercial real estate. So obviously there are the developers and owners who kind of make the skyline behind me happen, but there are so many more professions that are part of the commercial real estate industry. So if you're talking about how a building gets permitted, you're going to have engineers and consultants, architects designing the building, certainly brokers who help to sell the building or encourage investors to buy the buildings. You also have attorneys who make all of these deals possible, property managers within the building who make sure that everything functions every single day. And they were so critical, particularly during COVID in many buildings when they were the only people going into those buildings. And it really goes on. Architects, engineers, attorneys, subcontractors, construction, developers, owners, so many different pathways to take. Even marketing communications are so clear, so important to making sure these buildings can sell and lease up. So I'd say it's something that NAIOP as an organization, we've been really focused on creating opportunities for all types of people to get into the industry. And by focusing that on college as well as those people who maybe didn't think about this in college and are already in another related field, to have them understand the opportunities that exist in this field, and of course the opportunities for real wealth creation. And I think the Builders of Color Coalition has been an incredibly important asset to the greater Boston market, because I think about, I started at NAIOP almost 20 years ago, and I'd walk into a room and I'd often be the only woman in the room. And certainly there were very few people of color. And for many, many years, I think the development industry, the first response was, why don't you have more diverse teams? And the response was, like, I can't find the people. And Dave and the Builders of Color Coalition got sick and tired of that answer and really created this group that highlights the fact that, oh no, there are people out there, and we have to do everything we can to bring them in and welcome them and create more opportunities. So huge gratitude to Dave. It's been a real pleasure working with him. And I think that the future looks bright, though a lot of work certainly needs to be done.
Dave, you couldn't get a better handoff than that. Let me just say to Tamara's point, there's still very few women in the industry, but we have made headways. We've made some gains with women in the industry. Tamara, your leadership is exceptional. I want to applaud you because you often walk into rooms and it's a bunch of white men, and you hold your own. And thank you for the work that you do. But Dave, she's right. But the Builders of Color Coalition. The work that you've done beyond that has been important as we continue to try to increase diversity. Talk to us a little bit about the industry and more importantly, the work that you do and the leadership that you present to us here today.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Tamara, as well. And also to Chrystal and everybody else who's involved with hosting and organizing this event. Appreciate the invitation. For me, the kind of the core of this is when we talk about what is real estate, it's also kind of a question of why real estate. Why should somebody be interested in a career in real estate? And there are many reasons for that. You might have an interest, particularly your brain might be built that way. You might have an interest in land and space and buildings and all that. And you might also have an interest in building wealth. And the reality is that land and development and real estate are the core source of wealth and power in our society. And so for so long, they've been kind of sort of kept to a narrow set of people in our society who have had access to them because the knowledge is hard to get and the capital is hard to get. And so there are a lot of opportunities now that are opening up. NAIOP has been a key part of that, MassHousing. A lot of the organizations that are here, and a lot more organizations are really trying to push to expand the realm of who has access to this field. And that to me is going to also then therefore change the sort of the nature of dynamics in our society about overall kind of dynamics of power. And the city of Boston, I love this city. I grew up around here, and I am deeply in love with Boston. We are a very tribal city. We tend to stick to our own and support our own and really hold and support each other, and especially the folks that we're most connected to. And there is a deep beauty to that, and there's also a limitation to that. When you expand that to a larger level, it means that we end up being limited in who we interact with. And so I always try to see things positively and give people benefit of the doubt. And I think that when we have these limited structures where kind of everybody looks the same, I don't think it's because everybody's necessarily malicious. I think we tend to kind of go for and sort of create institutions in our own image and kind of pick people that we're more aligned with. And what we're encouraging folks to do is expand your circles, reach out, branch out, and make new friends and invite more folks to the table, because we get to live in this beautiful city that we all kind of love and imagine the beautiful future of. And there has never been a better time than now to get into the field of real estate, to be able to access these opportunities. They're very much open. I'm just a plug for the Builders of Color Coalition as a jobs board that is just continuously expanding. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of companies across the industry that are really eager right now to meet folks, young folks, established folks in the field, everybody across the spectrum. And especially, I think today we're addressing some of the younger folks interested in getting into the field. There are so many opportunities that exist right now. The Builders of Color Coalition is happy to sort of help provide some of those opportunities and guide folks there. But most of all, I want to encourage folks to think about this as a field, as a pathway for you, because otherwise it's just something that I honestly, I do this because this was a family thing. And my brother and sister looped me in and they twisted my arm. I was not planning to be a real estate developer. I was a community organizer and a teacher. And I ended up realizing that I love development and it's something that I have a passion for. And I'm actually able to now do some of this organizing work within that space. But it is something that I would love for more and more people to be able to see as a pathway. One last comment I want to mention on the topic of this question. I think Tamara mentioned a lot of the pathways, the fields, the different roles. A lot of folks ask me or mention to me that they're getting their real estate license. And I just want to dispel this idea that the real estate license is the pathway to get into the field. That is a great thing to do. Getting your real estate license helps you to be an agent or a broker, eventually become a broker. That means you can either rent apartments or you can sell homes. That is a great pathway to go down. That is a wonderful sort of set of careers within the industry, but it is not the only one. And to be frank, getting your real estate license will give you some familiarity with the field, but it is not the primary pathway to get into the field. There are a variety of other opportunities. NAIOP offers a lot of educational opportunities. BCC does as well. There are a lot of other organizations in the field. So I just encourage folks to not necessarily lean on the real estate license as your key entry point, but to come to these organizations, ask the questions. Tamara's door is always open. Mine is as well. We're happy to talk through how folks can navigate getting into the field.
No, that's great, and thanks for the introduction. And look, let me pick it up right there, Dave. You mentioned it. How do we get more young people into the field, young people of color? How do we get more people of color into the field? And Tamara, I'm going to go right to you. And we need to diversify the field. Give us some specifics about how we do that.
I would say looking at colleges, internships are incredibly valuable. I was actually just at a recent meeting where there were the heads of some of the major life science companies in the country. And they were talking about how 10 years ago, they were really focused on Ivy League graduates, and that was sort of their talent pool. They went to these certain universities. Now, Northeastern is their top choice because Northeastern's co-op program provides that in-person experience. The same is true with real estate. Making sure you can get an opportunity to be part of an internship program gives you skills you cannot get in the classroom. And so I think, what's really important is certainly for NAIOP and other trade groups and for companies to not only be looking at real estate clubs in colleges, but looking beyond that, looking to finance majors, looking to people who maybe never thought about commercial real estate as an industry or a field, and pulling in those people who might be thinking about a career in Wall Street. Commercial real estate is actually a great opportunity. And so, kind of being creative about, as I mentioned before, all the different skill sets that can apply to commercial real estate. So I would strongly urge any students to take advantage of internship programs. I'll certainly talk about a few that we're working with right now. But to me, internships are key. And then for those who are either in the field, what we've seen a lot, and Dave, I'm sure you can talk about this too, is sometimes people begin, maybe they'll buy a triple decker and then they get another triple decker. And it's kind of taking that jump from having one or two triple deckers that they own to that next big leap. It's really hard, particularly in a city in Boston, to Dave's point, where people have a very small group. They kind of hire those that they know, somebody's brother, somebody's friend. How do you take it to that next level? And that's really where BCC and NAIOP and other organizations like that provide those skill sets, build the connections, build the relationships, because at the end of the day, relationships really do matter, particularly in such a small city as Boston. So my number one recommendation is for students, internships are so incredibly valuable.
Dave, now going off to you. So talk to us a little bit more about, sort of not just young people, but people of color in general, those who are already, sort of maybe in a different career and want to look at real estate, or might even be in the real estate sector already, but don't feel like they're making traction or penetrating at all. Before you answer that, Dave, I do want to say I didn't do this at the top, but I'll do it now. If you have a question, and I see some people have already done it, please put your question in the Q&A tool where we have at the bar, at your control bar there. And if you'd like somebody's question, go ahead and like it. It'll actually move it up. We will get to those questions in a few. And I do see Chrystal, and we'll address her in a little bit. But Dave, go ahead and give us a response to that.
Great. I'm really excited to hear from Chrystal. So I was waiting to turn the mic to her, but I'll do my best, which is to say, I wanted to actually reiterate what Tamara said earlier, because I think it'll be helpful for folks to kind of note down that here's some of the pathways to get into the field. You could study architecture or be an architect, urban planning, engineering, there's structural engineering, civil engineering, environmental engineering. Some of these are critical areas where the city and other folks looking at contract are constantly looking for us. We need civil engineers all the time, environmental engineers. There's so much work that's out there. Those are great fields to go down. Finance and accounting, business majors, marketing, sales. And most of all, I would say, regardless of which kind of pathway, I think there's two key skills, and we're actually running this fellowship program right now, and I'm trying to emphasize this. One is, I think, getting good with using spreadsheets to know how to kind of budget and plan sort of on an accounting basis is a really critical skill, no matter what pathway you're going down, even within real estate or not. So that's something that I think that folks should kind of try to sort of develop skills around and get emphasized. I don't like to hear when folks said, oh, this is not really my thing, I'm not good at it. That is, we try to eliminate that mindset. Everybody can very well be good at it. And the fact is, spreadsheets make accounting and math so much easier. And once they become your friend, man, they're your best friend. And so I want to emphasize getting good at accounting, spreadsheets, budgeting. And then the other thing is project planning, and especially timelines and calendars. There are various ways to track the planning of a project, but understanding how those pieces fit together these could be for a group project in school, whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be specifically a real estate project, but knowing how to plan budgets and handle finances, and knowing how to plan in terms of timeline and time frame, and understanding how pieces fit together. Those are two critical skills, regardless of what field you go into and what path you go into. And those are things that I would say, if you're already in the field and you're spinning wheels and whatnot, that's a place I would double down. Very last thing is, we are more than happy to help with the networking piece, the part of in terms of expanding your connections within the field. There are a lot. NAIOP right now, in partnership with the Builders of Color Coalition, is launching a mentorship program. We're actually still open to some mentees to join that program. Sorry, Tamara, if you were going to mention that later, but there are a lot of opportunities now to get connections in the field, to sort of get the knowledge, the insight, the mentorship, and then also the connections that help you to move ahead. So very much, every field requires a lot of networking, especially the real estate field. It can be nerve-wracking. It can be very daunting, the idea of going and talking to folks who are some of the biggest developers in the city. But I promise you, I guarantee you, when they come to a NAIOP event, when they come to a BCC event, when they come to the trade organizations event, they are putting themselves out there to be made available, to be there as a resource, and you should by all means take advantage of it. And we're happy to help make those connections so that you don't have to be as nervous or scared along the way, because God knows so many of us don't come from the backgrounds where we had connections to these folks to begin with, or had that mentorship, but it is available and accessible now, and we want to make sure that folks are able to take advantage of that.
That's great, David. Really appreciate that. Chrystal, my sister. You had me worried there. I think I might have called your neighbor. I text like you're a staff member. I know Joyce was on the case, but good to see you. Thanks for jumping on, because we were all here waiting for your wisdom. Chrystal Kornegay just jumped on. I introduced you earlier, Chrystal, as Superwoman, just to put the pressure on. I know you know what we're talking about here today, so I won't get into it all, but I do want to come to you. You've been in this game for a while, and Tamara and Dave hit on the issues of what is real estate in the broad. We really went through it's broad. It's a lot underneath that umbrella, and then we went to how do you get in? It's hard to get in. And here are some things you can do. So you can hit any of those topic areas you'd like to, and how to engage youth to get in. But the other question really that I wanted to pose to you specifically is, somebody like you in leadership, and the rest of us here on this panel, what is the responsibility of current real estate professionals of color, current real estate professionals who are women, to youth of color and women and people of color who are trying to get into this industry? How do we see ourselves in this? How do you see yourself in this industry being able to help?
Thanks much, John. No pressure, but it's okay. I want to thank also Tamara and Dave in order to for the leading comments that you gave. I'm going to build on some things that you already said. And thank you for Joyce for texting me. It's like, it's time. And so, and others who helped organize this. So I will say, I grew up like many of you all may have grown up in a community in which like real estate development wasn't a thing I saw, right? We think about who we can be based on what we see. And what I saw were policemen and firemen and a civil servant workers, but also, right, like I saw like Bieber girls, like, you know, and like drug dealers and that kind of thing. And so thinking about what your choices are was really in a lot of ways brave, right? In terms of what you thought you could see and what you could be. So I appreciate that. I just started thinking about really like what was the community I wanted to build in terms of what I wanted to have people around me and where people could be welcome and what that meant. And so I got into this really through the affordable housing arena and thinking about community development and what that meant and how all that worked. I will build on what I've heard both Dave and Tamara say, like it takes technical skills, right? Like I wasn't afraid of spreadsheets. I love a good spreadsheet. Oh my God, I love a good spreadsheet. And it was like, it was my friend. I love a good spreadsheet. And also because like, you don't necessarily have to have the best math skills in order to run a good spreadsheet, right? And so that opened up a lot of areas to people, so don't feel intimidated by that. And also there's a lot of the things, it's the soft skills, which people haven't talked about. It's the ability to talk to people and work with people and encourage people to do things that they may not be prepared to do right away, because working with spreadsheets and engineering is difficult, but it's all things that you can learn, so to speak. But like your employer can't tell you how to be a good person to deal with people in different arenas. And so like understanding that that's a value and how you get along with people and how you move that forward is a value. You can sell that. Don't think that that's like, it, like you got to have that and this other stuff. But I don't want to tell anybody like just because you're like smooth talker, charmer, like that's it. But like you also have to have the technical skills too. I'm just saying that there are things that you have in your getting through the challenges that you have in life that you've developed that you can turn into a career that works well in property management. I mean, in real estate, commercial real estate. I was just thinking about property management because dealing with people is all property management, right? And so your ability to do that matters. And just want to say, building a little bit on what both Dave and Tamara said, is like, like talk to people, right? It's like what everybody's job is like is different. I learned when I was coming up, is like people love to talk about themselves and what they did every day. Like people love to talk about themselves and talk about how they got here. And they actually really want to be helpful. People aren't as selfish as you might think from like everyday media and that kind of thing. And so you really want to talk to people about what that can be. And it's okay to be 18, 20, 23 and not know exactly what you want to be when you grow up. And your job is to explore. And so talking about people is part of your job. And so go off and do that. And there are lots of people who are willing to help you.
That's great. Thank you, Chrystal. Really appreciate that. And, I think, the last sort of set of questions before we open this up, and I'm just going to remind people, use the Q&A function here to put your question in there. Check out the questions that are in there. Like those questions. If you hit a like or a thumbs up, the question becomes a priority question. And we're going to move into a Q&A in a little bit, but just wanted to encourage you to do that. So last round of questions before we get into the Q&A. there's a lot here in real estate. And from my own perspective, Tamara opened up by saying when she was in high school, she couldn't see it, right? In many ways, I know I couldn't. And so we've talked about an industry that's big, that's wealth producing, that pays well. Many people can't see it. We've heard from you different ways to try to get into the industry. Relationships matter. We've heard that internships matter. We heard that skills matter. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the barriers that each of you have seen, and what you've done to overcome those barriers, right? And so I know a lot of people who, as adults, who can see it, but can't achieve it, right? And so what are some, talk from your own experience, barriers that you've seen, and what you've done to overcome those barriers as ways to give people advice on this call before we go to the Q&A. Let's start with Dave, Tamara, and then Chrystal.
Chrystal, are you going to hate me if I try to pass it to you first? I just want to, yeah.
No, Dave, I'm not going to hate you. One of the barriers that we face, Dave was telling us a little earlier that he had grown up around the business. I'd never grown up around the business. Like, I didn't even know what this was. Like I said, when I grew up, there were 5 things that people did, right? And so, so some of it requires you as a person to have vision, right? And it's like, well, how did that house get built? And how does our neighborhood look? And to be inquisitive. And that in and of itself is a skill set, right? It's like, they don't teach you that, right, in school. It's like, what are your ABCs and how do you write and stuff? But that in itself is a skill set. And what I was trying to say is, like, once you get that skill set, then just talk to everybody you can talk to, because people love to talk about themselves. And so I got into this business because I grew up in this community in which there were workforce development programs. And then I noticed that people couldn't get through the workforce development programs because they had all these housing issues. And I was just trying to figure out, what did that mean and how did that work? And so I talked to people. I asked a bunch of questions, and people told me answers that I didn't understand, and then I asked more questions or whatever. And then I ended up going to school for that and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh my God, there's a whole field. Who knew, right? Who knew that there was a whole field in which one would do that? And so I would say to you, the biggest barrier, I know this might sound corny, but the biggest barrier is your own imagination and what you think you can be. And don't let what people say to you, what you see around you, be the barrier to that. And so, because there are lots of people here who want to see you in this field and want to help you get into this field. The 4 of us on the panel would love to be able to talk about that kind of stuff. And the 4 of us on this panel, maybe my colleagues will talk about this. The next thing is, once you imagine it, then there's access, right? And so the 4 of us on this panel will, we understand that we all got here not just because we could imagine it, but because of access. And so, but if you don't reach out, we don't know how to provide that access. So is that okay, Dave? Did I set that up okay? Okay, good. Who's next?
Well done. Tamara, you wanna take it from here?
Sure. So I kind of was drawn to this because I was a policy nerd, and I really liked government and how a bill becomes a law, that kind of stuff. And what I quickly discovered was the commercial real estate industry touches almost all aspects of policy, whether you're talking about affordable housing, transportation and infrastructure, jobs. I mean, John, is it 74% of the city of Boston's budget comes from property tax revenue? all of that money from all of these towers behind me and all the real estate allow for there to be firefighters and schools and teachers and all of the investment, all of the programs for the city. 74% of that comes from property tax revenue. So to be part of an industry that has that much of an impact and can build communities, and there is no question that there is a dark history for this industry and that significant reform has happened and more is needed. And I think it's really been good to see, the Massport model, for those who might not be familiar with that. It was pretty groundbreaking when it was introduced. And this is really the part, a model where Massport, the agency Massport, introduced it and kind of graded projects on diversity. That's something that was unheard of before, how diverse the teams are and who would get the winning bid. And the Omni Hotel in the Seaport, which just opened this past fall, great example of it, because they really incorporated diversity into all aspects of equity. They created small dollar opportunities for people of color to get involved. They made sure that the architecture firm, they had a larger architecture firm and gave an opportunity to a slightly smaller architecture firm, brought in minority women-owned businesses to the team to create a very diverse team. And then as the company continues to operate the hotel, making sure there are training programs in place for people of color, making sure that they are part of the operations. So the environment when you walk into the hotel is welcoming to all. And so that's something that came out of a policy. And so seeing the impact of policy on commercial real estate, and also, of course, as a result, the entire Boston community is pretty significant. So that's kind of my story of how I got involved and continue to be amazed, by the impact this industry has. One of the things I have personally seen as a challenge is sometimes you need to know how to talk the talk. And that is kind of to Dave's point earlier on about how everyone thinks they need a broker's license. Broker's licenses are great, nothing wrong with broker's license. But if you don't have one, there are so many other opportunities to get into this industry. So knowing that, the industry is larger than that, and that, just kind of knowing those key phrases, even Dave, with our mentorship program last year, I think we had 10 mentors and 10 mentees. It was the first year we did it. We're doing our second year this year. And the relationships that were created with that mentorship program are lifelong. Many of those people, helped. And it was a two-way street, by the way. It wasn't just the mentor helping the mentee. The mentee also gave significant value to the mentor. And what I've seen come out of it is, for the mentees, they were able to identify skill sets that they needed to strengthen. And that could just be through a simple conversation where their mentor would say, you know what, you should look into this class. Well, why don't you talk to so-and-so? Because there's this one little area that if you just kind of built up and strengthen, opportunity is yours. And it's happened. And I've seen it with my own eyes, these people who've been able to move up. And then, of course, on the mentee side, completely changing their view of opportunities and barriers just by making these personal connections. And I think everyone in their career benefits from a mentor. So again, internships early on, mentorship all through your career. And you don't need to have the same mentor, but multiple mentors throughout. So I would say those are two really important things to overcoming the barriers. I think I spoke far too long, so I'll turn it over to Dave now.
Thank you both.
Tamara, well done, Tamara. Not too long at all. Go ahead, Dave.
I'll see if I can add value to what Chrystal and Tamara just said. And I want to actually double down on what Chrystal said about vision. I think that is fascinating. I'm remembering when I was first out of college, I went to this AmeriCorps program where we were building playgrounds and hiking trails and stuff. And I remember just like, it was such a struggle to see a space and see what was possible, that could be possible. And I remember just trying to take a mental snapshot because it was so hard for me to like envision what we were about to do. And then to watch the process of this transforming. We were actually part of it, but it translates so much now into seeing a property that's either like really dilapidated, really falling apart, and you can actually see the vision. So many times when I've purchased a place where I'm like able to see that vision that it's hard for other people to see, or a piece of land where you want to construct something, build something that didn't exist before. That vision is so critical, and it's very difficult actually to just like out of the box have it. So it's something that if you can cultivate over time, practicing kind of seeing the possibilities and having that imagination. So Chrystal, I think that's incredible. I think that the sort of these barriers, of course, are done, and hopefully that system is adapted over time. But building one's credit score is important, and then building the capital can come from either saving that money over time, a bit by bit, to be able to build up to participate in a project. And it doesn't mean you have to be able to buy a full project outright. You can partner with other people, and you put in also what is called sweat equity, which is your time, your effort that goes into as a part of your portion of what goes into the cost of the project. But also, I've borrowed and I've set up like really positive terms with friends and family. I've built trust with my friends and family over time, and they've seen who I am and the fact that they can sort of trust me, that I execute on what I do. And so I have borrowed money at reasonable rates that are beneficial for them and for me. And then I've borrowed money to be able to do the projects that I've done as well. So those are different ways to build capital. The very last thing I want to mention is something that's a little different, which is our values can sometimes seem like a barrier within the field of real estate, because for so long, this field has seemed like a place where it's only you only can exist to sort of take the risk and make the money, and that's it. And to be frank, a lot of us came into the field in a manner that taught us that is the only outcome. And let me be clear, I want folks to generate wealth first and foremost from this work. And I think that is critical and crucial. And I will say that as much as I want folks to be able to express their values and to have their values drive the work, I want people to also make sure that they're focused on how this is also building their capacities for wealth, because I think that is critical, especially obviously among folks of color. But also I want to make it clear that development doesn't have to be done in exactly the same frameworks that you always see it always having been done. There are ways to integrate deep community interest in projects. There are ways to create deep sustainability within the ways that you build. There are ways to make projects execute on projects that are whole and fulfilling and sustaining and positive for our communities. That can be done through specifically affordable housing and specific programs to do that. And you can also just incorporate it in how you do business. You can do business differently. You can reshape this field. And I'm hoping that over time, as we sort of bring more and more folks to the table, that's going to happen as well. But of course, let's make sure we're building wealth for everybody also at the same time.
That's great. Really appreciate it. Great beginning to this panel. Now we're going to move to the Q&A section of this conversation. So I'm going to introduce the executive director, one of the co-hosts for our panel discussion today, and that's John Smith, executive director of the Dudley Neighborhood Initiative. All yours, Jay.
Thank you, John, and thank you for all the panelists and everybody who's online participating. So we have about 15 minutes for questions, so we'll just jump right in. Susan Bucky, JVS, is asking about where do most people start their careers in the real estate industry and what options are available to people without degrees? Dave, I wanted to throw that out at you. Where do most people start and what are the options available to people without degrees, college degrees?
I think that so some of the places that we mentioned, and some of those are more tied to degrees, but I want to, I guess, to highlight a few that are not as tied to having a college degree. One is like project management, process management, accounting, finance. These are some things that don't always, you can even also have an associate's, you can be trained in other ways. You can be building some of those skills yourself. I don't think that those require degrees. And then another clear pathway is construction management, especially if you can get sort of, if you're in the realm of construction, but especially building the skills to manage the process of construction, again, by managing costs, managing timeline. That's where I see folks who are in construction be able to sort of elevate through the process and then become their own sort of owners and then their own sort of developers and owners of land as well through the process. So those are a few ideas that come to mind specifically. And I guess, the sort of very standard that I think a lot of folks don't think about place that I think is a great place for folks to start is by being kind of what's like an assistant project manager, an assistant sort of development associate. Those are kind of the terms and the titles. Those don't require a ton of specific skills. It requires you kind of being sort of an overall sort of like kind of being put together, having some of that knowledge of timelines and how to do timelines and how to do some sort of a little bit with spreadsheets. But a lot of it is training on the job. So that's where if you can kind of put your resume in, show that you're a capable individual, regardless of what background you're coming from, and that you really want to work hard and learn the trade, I think those are great roles to start and come into and then learn the trade from other folks.
And so, John, can I just like jump in there? I totally agree with Dave, but I'm a mother, so I'm going to do my mother thing where I'm just like, why don't you go get a degree? right? Like, go get a degree. Like, what is the problem? It's like, go get a degree and go get a degree in ant farming. I don't care. But there are things that you will learn in going through a system. And I was a high school dropout. I went to college, I worked my way through college, and you can do it over time, but let's not get ourselves into the idea that, I don't want to go to college, so how can I get this job? It's like, get yourself in the best position in which you can create wealth for yourself, for your family, and for your community. And it might not happen exactly the way that people talk about it on TV, but you can make this happen and believe and invest in yourself. All the things that Dave said is true, but go get your degree too.
Appreciate both perspectives. Chrystal, Kornegay sounding like a West Indian mother. For Tamara, Kimberly wants to know, do we have resources concerning green careers in real estate? And can you speak to other practical opportunities?
Sure. I think by green, I assume that the speaker's asking about sort of climate resiliency type. Okay. So what a field to be going into right now. Absolutely huge amount of opportunity there. Between the legislature last year passed a landmark climate bill. They're in the process of passing another one here in Massachusetts. The city of Boston is doing a number of things. Net zero, which basically means getting to net zero emissions. It's the focus for every single commercial real estate developer now, and they are looking for people with knowledge on how building systems operate, how we can have more energy efficient buildings, how we can, in Boston, we're on the water, so we need to be thinking about resiliency. And owners and developers want to protect their investments. They do not want them to wash away or be flooded all the time. They want to make sure their tenants can come in and out safely. So making sure there is an understanding of climate resiliency, huge opportunities. So I would suggest really on the engineering field is where we're seeing a lot of that, because engineers are being hired by developers and owners on any project right now. The bar is getting higher and higher. What was accepted even 5 years ago is no longer acceptable when it comes to energy efficiency and climate resiliency. We are setting very aggressive standards for both the state and city. And not just for new development, we're also talking about existing buildings too. So figuring out how we can have some pretty old buildings in the city of Boston and make sure they can get to net zero emissions. So my recommendation would be property management and engineering skills are going to be in tremendous demand right now, and definitely a field worth looking into. I don't know if others have other thoughts on that.
Others?
I would second that, John, real quickly. I would, I got in this job, in this position to try to help diversify this industry. That's one of the main reasons why I'm in it. So I'm gonna direct people to my website. Tamara's right. You're gonna find a bunch of property management positions there, and I'd love to bring more people from our communities, more women, more people of color into the industry, and understanding the green building mechanics, processes, and what our clients will need is going to be a big plus. And so would love people to apply.
John, can you share that website in the chat?
Chat is disabled. I was looking for a chat because that would be perfect. Maybe I'll share it in one of the questions.
Yeah, maybe just try it out. Thank you, John. Chrystal, Priscilla's asking about the city, but I think you probably have insight into the city and state. How can community engagement workers partner with the city in this work to improve the outcomes? So I think the essence of the question is, how can the participatory engagement to help design economic initiatives and pipelines for residents?
Sure. One of the things about Boston is that it does development, particularly in the neighborhoods, that includes a community process. And I would say, as a person who comes from that space, I would say one of the things that is great for you to understand really is, as Dave said, spreadsheets, right? It's because the math really matters around how deals come together, what things people can and cannot do. And it isn't just a thing in which the design that matters too. It isn't just a thing where it's like who's participating in terms of diversity, that matters too. But if all of those things don't come together with the finances and the math, that's a problem. And the more you understand that in terms of a community person, the more you can negotiate, right? And the more that you can understand what you can and cannot ask for, what the levers are that you can and cannot pull. And I will just say, like, that works as a community person, but for your life, that works, right? The more you understand that and how that opens up in terms of how money moves, how math moves together. And I will say what the one thing that I always talked about and I always touted when I was on the community level is like community people know more about how to manage money than anybody, right? It's like, you know, how to make $1 out of 15 cents is like, oh, come on. Like we all know how to do that in the communities that we're talking about and how we serve, and thinking about how to translate that into development finance and real estate finance and government finance is actually really not that hard. It could be intimidating, but it's not that hard. And so I would say that that is the one skill that I would encourage people to use and to gain and grow in.
Thanks, Chrystal. Tamara, Taylor was talking about the NAIOP mentorship program and getting students engaged with internships, and wanted to know what opportunities are there for CRE industry service providers to support and participate in the programs, especially those who don't operate in development or financing directly.
Sure. So I'll talk about a couple of things. On the internship side, there is a phenomenal program called Project Destined that NAIOP recently partnered with. It's a national program. They're doing, I think, work in 13 different cities. They came to Boston this fall, and it requires employers to basically adopt a team. So they make a financial commitment, and it's a team of 10 people. And these college students go through a program that's about 8 weeks long, where they have virtual courses online that are phenomenal and really give the hands-on experience about how does a deal happen? How do projects actually get built? And then it culminates with kind of like a Shark Tank style competition. And different cities will then compete with others in different companies. These kids come out of this program with tremendous knowledge and experience. Plus, they're also working with a team led by people from the firm. So say JLL has a team, and there are managers at all different levels of JLL who are working with these students to really make their, they want their team to win. It becomes competitive in a really phenomenal way. And these kids walk away with outstanding skills. So if you are a company, highly, highly recommend looking into Project Destined. It's just a very well-run program, outstanding. CREST is another program we have long supported. It's a summer-based program, so a summer internship program. I know many NAIOP members have supported it for a long time. Another great opportunity just to kind of see how it all happens, and the best part about many of those internships is that they can kind of get a little taste of the different divisions within the company. So they don't need to get stuck at one desk, but if they get a little taste, they might find out they hate one part they thought they were going to love, and they love something they thought they're going to hate, but they don't know until they actually get that hands-on experience. So that's on the internship side. On the mentorship side, there are so many different programs going on. Obviously, Dave and I talked about the NAIOP BCC mentorship program. We're mentoring, we're kind of partnering BCC and NAIOP board members with BCC members and their network. We're, I think, about to hit our max on that, but we're getting close, and that's a great 6-month program that's going to be launching. But there are also a wide range of other real estate organizations that have their own mentorship programs, whether it's the Real Estate Finance Association, REFA, CREW, which is focused on women in commercial real estate, ULI, so many other groups that are worth looking into. So really taking a look, kind of getting a taste of what associations offer, getting to know the people who are involved with each, find the one that fits for you. You don't have to pick one right away. Just to Chrystal's point, talk to people, go to events, get to know people, get on a committee, just meet people, and then your path opens up to you. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Tamara. There's a question from an anonymous attendee. We'll figure out who you are later, but wants basically all of you to talk about if you could create one program or strengthen an existing one to help diversify or create new jobs in CRE, what would it be?
I'm going to go first here. So I was undersecretary, and the one thing that I remember most when I became undersecretary, it was a little bit of a big deal. No one had really come from where I came from to be undersecretary, blah, blah, blah. But I went around the state and asked people this question: what is the one thing you want me to do? And the answer is what I'm going to answer to this person: understand that it takes more than one thing. And so there isn't a one thing, there isn't a silver bullet, there isn't an answer like that. And it just struck me so much in thinking about how we get to where we want to get to. We create this environment as advocates, as advisors, as practitioners, as if there's our thing and we're advocating for it, but it takes more than one thing. And so my answer to that is we need all the things in order to diversify commercial real estate. And I don't have one thing. I want the one thing that I want. I want what Tamara wants. I want what Dave wants. I want what John wants. I want whoever the anonymous person wants. We need all the things because we're so far behind and we've got so far to go that let's just do all the things.
I guess what I would add to that is I am excited, as many of you may know, Mayor Michelle Wu has talked about changing the process for development projects. And, there is some nervousness within the development industry about what does this mean? Obviously, developers really like predictability when it comes to permitting, but it's also a really long process. And we've heard from community advocates that going to 100 different community meetings is grueling and exhausting for all involved and doesn't actually get the best result for both sides, not always. So it's a really critical time for the city right now. The mayor recently brought in Arthur Jemison, who has some phenomenal experience we're really excited to work with, to see how we can really improve this entire process for both sides, making sure they can work together. And so I think, making sure we have as many people at the table as we can, learning from past mistakes to improve the future it's a really exciting time for the city of Boston right now.
Thank you, Tamara. I will throw this out to Dave and then say I'm going to put you on the clock because we have to end in a couple of minutes. But I really want to ask this question because it concerns equity, and so many times we're talking about equity and inclusion. And there is a question sitting here about what opportunities are there for small minority developers to partner with firms in Boston and receive financing opportunities to participate on a larger scale. So I want to end with that question and hear Dave's thoughts. And thank you for all the panelists and what you've shared. Go ahead, Dave.
So that definitely it's a big question, but some of the things I'll point you to. So there are, I'm not going to be able to list them all, but there are a variety of financing opportunities, and we're trying to create more of them. And BCC is happy to be a resource. The Builders of Color Coalition just actually I hate defaulting to acronyms all the time, but the Builders of Color Coalition is happy to provide those some of those resources in terms of places. A lot of also the banks and financing institutions that we partner with are really readily available and really excited to start financing some folks that they didn't know before. We host a financing forum annually that MassHousing has been a co-sponsor of over the years. And we bring together the banks and we do some education around the financial pieces of development. And then we actually get folks to connect with the banks that exist. And I also am going to give, I'm just keeping to shouting out of the work that we're doing. And to answer the last question, we're going to keep doing what we're doing as the Builders of Color Coalition. But we're about to host on June 8th, and I hope I didn't get the date wrong, but Colleen and Sai will tell me if I did. We're hosting something called the Ownership Opportunities Forum, which is a chance for us. We're bringing in some national experts actually to talk about what it means to participate on projects as a smaller developer or real estate professional on some of these larger projects that are happening now in Boston because of the increasing sort of scope of diversity on teams that is fortunately happening in the city. A lot of folks are getting asked if they could participate in projects, and some aren't yet and would like to be at the table. So we're going to be having one of probably our biggest event of the year to talk about what it means to participate in a project as a joint venture partner, as an actual development partner, and also what does it mean to participate as a financial partner, as a sort of limited partner or an equity partner in the project. So we're going to break some of that down. We then have a panel to talk about the projects that they've worked on. I think that's going to be a great resource. Again, that's on June 8th. Those are some of the thoughts and the resources that I can provide right now. I'm happy to talk more with folks. And I know we'll all provide our information, but thebuildersofcolor.com is the resource to be able to access those events and other opportunities. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dave, Tamara, Chrystal, and John B. Really appreciate you all participating and all the engagement. There's a ton of questions about, how can we follow up, internship opportunity, all the things that were mentioned. I'm going to throw that to Trin. I'm sure the OWD office can handle, how to reach out to all the panelists and take care of that. So with that in mind, I'll throw it over to Trin and she can wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, John Smith. And thank you all the panelists. I mean, you all make me feel as if I should rearrange my careers and then take another degree, which I can't afford anymore with all these degrees I have, go into real estate and do something, considering how inspiring you all are. So thank you. And in closing, I want to thank all of our great panelists and to John Barrows of Cushman and Wakefield. And to all of our attendees who took the time to learn and hear your wisdom. So thank you. Also, thank you to DSNI and John Smith for your leadership, for co-partnering with us and ensuring that equity is important when we're talking about development, hiring, and all the work that we do around this great city. So thank you, John Smith, for your leadership around that. A reminder that this recording will be posted on our website for those who you would like to follow up. We took notes here. There are great questions and comments. So we're going to follow up with you offline to ensure that you get the resources you need and the answers that you're looking for. And please look out for our invitation to our next employer panel on clean energy on June the 9th. I don't want to compete with Dave, but we're pretty good too. I know he's got one on June the 8th, and maybe he can give a shout out to our June the 9th event. So thank you all, and for all the great work. Keep doing what you're doing. Equity, racial justice belongs in every industry. The more we talk about it, the more we integrate it, the more it's within our culture, and it should be in a priority wherever we are and whichever industry we are. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.